Africa Business News, proudly sponsored by EY.
Africa, it is huge, it is diverse, and its business landscape fascinating and dynamic. And that's our business here on your favorite weekly African business stop. We have Bonnie Tunya joining us from Nairobi, Kenya, where the visit by U.S. President Obama is making endless headlines. On Sundays in Lagos, Nigeria, covering West Africa for us. And I'm with Christine Mondo here in Johannesburg. My name is Victor Homoeswana, and this is the Africa Business News. Mambo Boni, the global summit in Addis Ababa not yielding as much as most of us had hoped, and on a global tax template, I mean. And there's a hype around the forthcoming visit by U.S. President Barack Obama, but you have been to the Westgate Mall, shopping mall, I suppose, since it reopened on Saturday. Have you, Bonnie?
Well, Victor, unfortunately, I haven't had a chance to visit the mall, but that is something that I must do in the coming days, Victor. It's a brilliant story of resilience. And you see, 2 years after the terror attack struck Westgate in Nairobi, the upscaling of the shopping mall was reopened just 3 days ago. That was Saturday, amid many unanswered questions of what happened during the 4-day siege. Now, the Westgate was a symbol of Kenya's aspirational middle class, if you may, and has come to represent Kenya's struggle to combat a growing Islamic terror threat on its own soil. Well, when journalists first visited a few days before the reopening of the mall, there are workmen who are putting the finishing touches on the regional shops and restaurants, while the flagship Nakumatt store, where the shoppers covered behind the shelves and gunmen picked them off, is bigger than ever.
The struggle continues, but ahead of President Obama, U.S. President Barack Obama's visit to Kenya on Thursday, I believe there's a wish list going around, Bonnie. What does the East African community want from Obama?
I think the question should be, what do I want from Obama, Victor?
Oh, yeah.
There's a long list indeed, and President Obama will indeed be met by a long wish list from the region. Now, Victor, the East African community countries have presented a list of issues they hope the United States government will indeed address to expand its trade partnership between them and the region. For instance, Victor, trade ministers from the EAC partner states have made a formal request to the U.S. government asking it to relax the stringent measures imposed on the agricultural exports to the U.S. and also review the high tariffs on some of the agricultural products such as sugar and cotton that are being exported to the U.S. Now, they in fact are seeking a removal of tariffs on all the agricultural exports from the East African space, as well as creation of more quotas, which they say will be consistent with the U.S. obligation under the UN Millennium Development Goals, which would fulfill a key demand for, from these countries in the World Trade Organizations, Victor. But as far as the East African countries are continues, they're also pushing for prior renewal of another of the 10-year term that has last month reauthorized a renewal for 10 years by the U.S. House of Congress, commonly known as AGOA. And the trade among the EAC countries is something that probably is pushing all this agenda, because the U.S. amounted to just about $2.8 billion US dollars in 2014 alone. That is trade between the U.S. and the East African region. And U.S. exports to the EAC reached about $2 billion US dollars, while American imports from the region, which rose just about 52% from 2013 total to about 743 million.
Lastly, I never know what to make of ratings, although there's a mixed bag of ratings by Fitch, the rating agency. Rwanda on the winning end, and of course in its latest ratings, but Kenya not so good.
Yes, Fitch did give a mixed set of results for the East African region lately, and Rwanda has increased its ability to access more donor funds by improving its international credit ratings. This is according to the various rating bodies that have been putting out their results. Now, the Central African state, whose budget is just about 50% of that is donor financed, joined Uganda and Kenya, which have received an improved score compared to last year's from the Fitch ratings. For the Rwandan particularly was positive. However, in Kenya, they received a stable score early this year, as rating firm Fitch said that the country had emerged from uncertainty of the post-election crisis and was coping well through the first wave of the global economic crisis. However, Fitch also moved to put Kenya's long-term foreign and local currency issuer default ratings from negative to stable, as they were placed at B+ and BB- respectively. Now, another point that we must note is Uganda, which has received a B+ rating with a stable outlook from June of 2008 to now, and a better rating by Standard & Poor's in 2009. But the icing on the cake, Victor, has to be Rwanda, whose long-term foreign and local IDRs were at B- with a positive outlook. Now, the country continues to carry wide-ranging reforms which have led the economic growth and doubling of the per capita income to just about 4 years, contributing to relatively high rating currently. So, I mean, Rwanda is indeed the poster child for all things possible in East Africa.
Well, everybody heaping praises upon Rwanda. Thank you very much, Bonnie Tunya, coming to us from Nairobi in Kenya. Up next is Christine Mundwa as we cast our gaze on Southern Africa. We're still with Africa Business News, and in our Johannesburg studio, I'm with Christine Mundwa, South Africa, and lots of people elsewhere in the world still in the Mandela Day mode. But there were 2 changes of leadership in the country this past week. One at a mobile telecommunications giant, MTN, which was followed by the ending of an industrial action that had almost crippled the company. The other one, Christine Mundwa will tell me about it some more, is that of the head of a passenger rail agency of South Africa, PRASA. Christine, we talked about PRASA and Lucky Montana and the tall trains or the not so tall trains. What is the story? What do you make of his departure, sudden departure this past week?
Well, I think the key question is, what does government make of his departure? We now understand that high-level government officials, possibly including the president, is not happy with the board's decision to fire Montana. Of course, this was a board decision that was backed by the Transport Minister, Dipuo Peters. But there was supposed to be a press briefing explaining why he had been fired. That was cancelled at the 11th hour after, we understand, government instructed the rail agency to not have that press briefing. So he may very well get his job back.
But he was serving notice, wasn't he? He's going to be out there in November anyway.
Well, this is the thing. When that brief, these were all questions that would have been asked at this briefing. But we now understand that, in fact, there's been a lot going on behind the scenes. We also understand that Mr. Montana happens to be particularly very connected politically. And so the chairman of the board may be the one facing departure, and Montana may very well be reinstated.
What else do you have out Southern Africa for us?
Well, then, of course, there is in Zimbabwe, the telecom sector. So the government plans to buy yet another mobile operator.
Yes, what's with that? What's with Telecel? It looks like it's always attracting the attention of the government.
Certainly. I mean, the entire sector does. If you listen to the ICT minister responding to questions about why government would want to buy another company in the sector, given the fact that the companies they already own are underperforming. And he says that technology, I mean, our lives are becoming more dependent on technology. As a result, we need to protect the sector from powerful individuals. I don't know if monopolizing the sector is the way to go, because this effectively leaves Econet as the only independent company within the sector. So we understand that the 2 shareholders of Telecel, it's a big company with about, 2 million subscribers. The 2 shareholders, one being a Russian company headquartered in Amsterdam, right, and one being a local consortium, are going to sell their stakes to government. It's going to be funded through one of government's other companies. Of course, you can imagine that cash wouldn't be available on hand.
Thank you, Christine Mundwa. Next up, Oni Sunday joins us from Lagos to chat to us about West Africa. Oni, I was perturbed to read that 2 planes collided in Lagos, although no one was hurt. Aviation in Nigeria has to keep up in safety and sophistication to match the intense requirements of what is Africa's largest economy now. What happened, and what is the Federal Aviation Authority of Nigeria doing about this?
Well, Victor, that's true. Actually, the 2 planes had their bodies partially damaged as a result of the collision. Now, one of the planes was rather taxiing from the runway to the second Murtala Mohammed Airport to disengage passengers, while the other aircraft was preparing to take off to Port Harcourt from the same terminal. Now, according to sources at the airport, the Port Harcourt-bound aircraft was parked at Gate 4, while the arriving aircraft was parked at Gate 3. However, I believe the marshals misdirected the arriving aircraft to the same gate as the parked aircraft, and that was what led to them brushing. Well, the Nigerian Civil Aviation Authority, of course, immediately grounded both aircraft while passengers were asked to disembark, and tickets have been refunded to the passengers on the Port Harcourt-bound aircraft.
Only not so long ago, Lamido Sanusi, who was the central bank governor, was dismissed in Nigeria, among other things, for insisting that there were billions of dollars of oil money missing. Now, long after he's gone, it looks like he was right after all, with former petroleum minister offering to stop any further investigation into her dealings, paying lots of money. Is this true? It sounds like the stakes are pretty high here.
Oh, well, the thing is, I would like to point out that this story was only reported by Sahara reporters. So it cannot be verified at the moment. But from the look of things, it seems Sahara got this information from a source in the presidency. And so no name was mentioned as to who gave this particular information. Well, that said, top government officials are secretly returning stolen funds to the present administration. Now, according to the report by Sahara, the immediate past Minister of Petroleum Resources, Diezani Alison Madueke, offered to refund about $250 million to the Nigerian government in return for immunity from further investigations, and possible prosecution. Now, this move of redemption, from what they reported, received a cold shoulder from President Muhammadu Buhari. You will also recall that investigations on stolen funds are ongoing across several quarters in Nigeria. You also recall that Sahara exclusively reported last week, that the former Minister of Finance and coordinating Minister of the Economy, Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala, had been cooperating with President Buhari's administration in an ongoing, or some would describe it as quiet probe of a series of investigations on questionable financial transactions during Jonathan's era. Now, the sources also revealed that Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala had given President Buhari documents that exposed a number of shady financial deals executed in the past administration. We'll just have to sit back and see how the story unfolds in the coming days.
Thank you, Oni Sunday out of Lagos, Nigeria. That ushers this week's trivia. Stay tuned to Africa Business News. And in our trivia this week, I asked Bonnie Tunya which Southern African country celebrates what they call President's Day as a holiday on July 21st.
Victor, Botswana maybe?
Botswana maybe? Is that your final offer, Bonnie? This day used to be a 2-day...
Final offer.
It used to be a 2-day holiday in Africa's top diamond producer, Botswana. You're right. Also, the Gambia celebrating the Revolution Day on July 22nd, the same day on which Swaziland marks what they call the King Father's birthday. However, a happy President's Day to the people of Botswana for the July the 21st. We're back with you next week with more Africa Business News. We thank Oni Sunday out of Lagos, Bonnie Tuya in Nairobi, and earlier on, Christine Mundo here in Johannesburg. Stay tuned to CNBC Africa. Until next week, adios.